Screencast 58, Data Binding with AX Cubes. Welcome Dynamics AX content creators. Today we're going to discuss data binding with AX Cubes. And we're going to continue the series we've had for improving the overall experience of role centers and expressly focused on improving the productivity of developers tasked with creating these charts. So as you'll see in some of our out-of-box charts that ship with the R2 release of AX 2012, we've got several charts that visualize pre-aggregated data. Now these are great for allowing individuals to monitor the health of your business with quick glances at charts that are housed within their role centers. You should create views that are specifically geared at helping people drive decision making in their daily activities. These things are driven by MDX queries. That's how you will create data connections to any of our cubes that come out of the box or custom cubes that you created yourselves. The framework itself manages the connections to the database. All you need to worry about is building the view you need to get that chart that you're interested in. Today I'll show you some of the tools we've added to VS to allow for quick and easy data binding using your custom MDX queries. It's important that you familiarize yourself with the data before you finalize your charts, so you're sure that the chart will handle the style of data that you'll get in the production environment. Mainly the scale of the numbers, the types of data fields that you're looking for. So let's take a quick example and see how one would build a connection to an MDX query. To an aggregate query set using MDX. So again, here's an example, and these charts, each one of them is driven behind the scenes by an MDX query. Now what you'll normally get is a customer or person asking for a feature or a chart that would visualize data they're interested in. And in this case, I've come into SQL Server Management Studio. I've selected the sales cube, which ships out of the box, and I'm simply browsing this cube. This allows me to build a view of the cube, some of the data that's in the cube, so I can get a sense of the data I'm looking for. Now in this scenario, we're specifically trying to graph cost of goods sold, which is in the measures collection under customer invoice lines, minus accounting currency. And we're tracking that by month. And specifically, we filter this to be calendar year 2007, just to make sure I can get a sample. It's a good sample in this data set, so I'm using it here. So what this allows you to do is essentially giving you a view of expenses over the last 7 months. And you would expect someone to be interested in this view in their role center so they can keep track on this figure. So once I've got an understanding of the type of data someone wants to surface in a chart, I'll usually come over here, and the first thing I'll do is make sure that I've got a query that surfaces that data, that actually is able to access the cube to produce that data set. And Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio is literally the tool to do that. It's the tool to use to create the query that gives you the data set that you want to chart. So this is pre-aggregated data. It's going to give me fast access to some data that really is built off of a large amount of transactional data that resides in the AX database. So now that we've got our query, I'll go ahead and run this and just make sure that it's giving me the results I'm looking for. These are literally the names I want to show up, and these are unformatted amounts that give me the vertical axis. So this essentially defines a single series. So now I've got an MDX query that will give me a set of data points that I want to visualize in a chart. So where we left off in our last session was that we created a multi-series chart with varying chart types. So I'm going to come in here and clean up some of this code, because now that we've gotten some experience working with the markup, we can show you how to use it to actually bind to AX data sources. So I've been debugging, but I'm going to stop debugging at this point just so I can make sure that my data connections are correct. I'll give yourself some real estate here. You'll also notice that when you're not debugging, you have access to this properties window, and we're going to need that in this instance. So in the first session, I showed you a way of working with static data, and it involved removing your data source connection for this ASP.NET chart control. But you know what? We're going to need it now. So let's bring it back and let's define it to be equal to the name of this data source aggregate up here. Now this aggregate is a custom aggregate defined by the AX framework, and this is how we have developed or given you access to a modeled way of interacting with your cube databases. So now that I've done this, I've set up the connection between my control and the data source. That's all I needed to do. I can save this. Now I'm going to go ahead and define the query that's used to retrieve that set of data for my data source. So I'll simply come in here. It's just another property on the data source aggregate, and you'll see it's called command text. I'll just say command text equals, and I usually like to give myself some room here and close off this aggregate. And between these lines, I'm going to simply copy in this MDX query. Simple as that. So I've got my E here, and let's make sure everybody is happy with this. And it looks like we are. I have no errors here. My data source ID. Okay, so now that we've done that, I can actually run this now, but I'm going to show you a trick, something that's really worth paying attention to because it'll come in handy at some point in the future. Once I've done this, you'll be surprised at some of the magic that happens behind the scenes, but these aren't literally the names of the columns that will be returned. So let's go look at how we help you address this problem. Once you've done your command text definition, come over to the designer, select that data source aggregate, and you'll see that the command text is defined here. Let's go ahead and click this button here under command text. And what this will do is it'll bring up a tool that allows you to, just review, do your last final checks on your MDX, and you can actually run it directly here, just to get your last check, just to make sure this is exactly the query that you're interested in. This is giving you the data set. This is one just last way of verifying that you have the query that you're interested in here. We'll show you later how to maybe parameterize this year or allow you to look at this view across multiple years. But for this scenario, we're just going to look at a single year and a fixed year at that. So one thing I want you to notice is that the names here are different from the names that you have in your select statement. And the names that are actually returned here are the ones that you'll need to reference when doing the connection between your chart control and your data source. So now that we've done this, again, this dialog is only available in the designer, and you'll do it through the command text button here. So once we have that, we're pretty comfortable that our data is correct. So the next thing we need to do, which is really important, is do the data binding. We have to essentially define what our X and Y axes are. And you get those essentially from that caption dialog. So I've already I've captured what those values are, so I'm just simply going to come in here and say my X value member equals, and it was that date month caption value. Okay, and my Y value members equals, and it's going to be that measures cost of goods sold minus accounting currency. So I'll go ahead and fill that in here. Okay, I think everyone is happy. Let's go ahead and save and see what that gives us. What's going on here? But what we should see, awesome, are the values across that year period that are now showing up in my chart control. We can verify them by doing a quick comparison, And as you can see, it's just much easier to digest this chart over the raw figures that would have come up from just the direct query. This is just a quick example of how useful these chart controls are. So this is a quick demonstration of how you create a direct data binding to an aggregate data source, an AX cube that represents a collection of pre-aggregated data, which is perfect for rendering in chart controls in your Dynamics AX Role Center pages. Well, I checked the clock, and that's all the time I've got. If you have topics you'd like to see covered in future sessions, be sure to let us know. You can reach me at our blog at msdn.com. Just search for Dynamics AX BI and get plugged in. Again, my name is TJ Vassar, and thanks for watching.